this is one of the worst narratives, I think, in the college football realm. To be honest with you, it's not even tough love. It's just actually
Common sense, man.
love.
Yeah.
And it's, if you think, and I said, Jim's Bait Shop can exist in Statesboro when we're talking about splitting the group of 5 off from a playoff standpoint. I'm not even saying you don't have to play each other during the regular season. I'm not saying that. Now, I think that's going to happen once we break away and we have 24 teams in a conference, because they're not going to increase regular season games due to player safety while increasing playoff games. But the fact that you think, and I'm not saying a one-off game on a Saturday with a mid-level P5 versus the best G5 out there, in aggregate, a group of 5 team is not going to win the national championship. They're just not, because you're operating in a different arena. Jim's Bait Shop can have a lot of success in Statesboro, but they're never going to be Walmart. They shouldn't be expected to be Walmart. Walmart has more money. They have more resources. They're in 2 different arenas. But saying that by having a group of 5 playoff on its own means you hate the group of 5, I think, and we think, is completely asinine and totally misses the common sense reality and the best thing for the group of 5.
Okay, so I haven't even hit this angle of it. There are like 5 different common sense angles. But let's go Jim's Bait Shop for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens today, not to get political, because we would never do that in this building.
No.
But what happens today is you have the major corporation in the market lobbying for increased regulation. Why? Because they know it ups the cost of doing business.
Yep.
Now, someone on the street would say, well, why would they ever want to pay more in tax dollars? Because they can afford it. They know Jim's can't.
Yeah.
And so Jim's gets choked out, and they end up taking the entire market share. The same thing, it's a little apples to oranges, but 50,000 foot, the same thing's about to happen here. The same thing's happening in that no one has to have a press conference wherein the SEC and the Big Ten say, we have an announcement, we're breaking away. You don't have to do that because it's happening naturally.
Yeah.
And so you could have your Boise States in years past. You could have your UCFs in years past. That's the absolute closest that these 2 worlds were ever going to be to merging. They've started to drift away again, and you're going to have such a disparity in revenue and income that even what used to be G5, P5 is going to pale in comparison to how wide the gap is. Okay, so you have an opportunity right now to be proactive and to do something about it. And instead, you've got people shouting from not the mountaintops, but the hilltops, and saying, no, you can't relegate us. You can't make us second-class citizens. And the way I look at it is, number one, to be purely selfish with you, this doesn't impact me. It doesn't impact me because, I don't spend a lot of time talking UAB or Coastal Carolina on my show. I watch it, but the audience patterns dictate we don't talk about it. So it's irrelevant to me. I look at it, whether people believe it or not, strictly through the prism of what's best for the G5 teams. Like, what helps them give the best shot at sustainability? And what helps them is, instead of letting terms be dictated by the big boys for once in your existence in the modern age, get out ahead of it and create your own system and make your own rules and find partners and create your own ecosystem, and not one where the end goal is, let's be included in a playoff so we can get body bagged. How about existing in a world where you play a Georgia or you play a South Carolina in out-of-conference play, so you get your shot at the big boys. We build in a promotion and relegation system, so you do have a rung on a ladder that could get you to the top level. But in the aggregate, you're also playing for a spot in a tournament that's not about inclusion. You have a chance to win it.
Yeah.
Like Tulane, in their best of worlds this year, could make the playoff. That's it. That's the end of the road. And to me, I look at that and I think it's so asinine to allow people in suits who are cashing checks you'll never see a dime from to brainwash you into thinking that's the preferred method over existing in a world that you create, you control, and you could actually win.
Well, going to these super leagues, David, and I think we do need to have a true sit down and a split of, listen, Cincinnati has the capabilities to operate at a Power 5 level.
So pull them up
right?
here.
There are some Power 5s that once you go to these super leagues, without the media rights that they have in the conference right now, cannot operate at the level of other ones. So you may have some P5s that need to become G5 and some top level, Memphis maybe, right, who just got a huge bucket of money from FedEx over there. They could possibly compete at the Power 5 level. Let's cipher those out and let's split it and let's have multiple playoffs.
Yeah, so for the Group of 5 playoff, I mean, for context here, I was born in Greenville, North Carolina. My mom was teaching at ECU. I was raised in Statesboro, Georgia. My mom was teaching at Georgia Southern. Those schools put food on our table. I grew up watching Irk Russell win the Division I AA championship every year, at least compete for it. I'm running into this guy in Kmart, right? Adrian Peterson, Greg Hill, Tracy Ham, all these great players. Then Paul Johnson takes over. He's competing for the same championship. The town loved this stuff. Even if they would go lose by 30 points to Georgia at the beginning of the season, they're competing for the I AA championship. And because they did really well, they got to go up and get invited to the Sun Belt. That was a really good thing. I didn't understand how much drama there was on this until I responded to a post of yours recently, because we've asked several coaches and administrators when they come on, how do you feel about a group of 5 having their own playoff? And some say, no, I don't want it just because from a financial sense, it's better for us to compete up here, even though we may not win the championship. And others say, no, that would be great. I think it could be lucrative. But it's always from a rational place. Some of the comments I got responded to on your post, I mean, basically saying like, I'm everything that's wrong with college football, when I thought I was taking the pro group of 5 position. Mainly my thought is 134 football teams vying for one trophy is too many. In basketball, maybe you can get away with that because you can put 70 of them in a tournament at the end of the season and play it out. You can't do that with football. So how is this going to culminate, and do you think that I am everything that's wrong with college football?
Well, if the internet says you are, then you are.
Sure.
And I'm right there with you, so we can lock arms on that. I am always dumbfounded. By this particular topic, I'm really dumbfounded because it's one where I could easily sit this thing out. Like I said a second ago, I could easily sit it out, and I could watch G5 games, and I'd be totally fine with that. I don't want to white knight myself, but when I give a take on this particular topic, despite how many people call you a corporate shill for sharing your opinion, I got zero corporate interest in this. Like, by the way, do 5 seconds of research on how this show was formatted, how my show was formatted. That's the last thing that any of us in this room are. It's just wanting something that makes sense. And to go back to your point a second ago, I think you would have seen it too, one of the most common refrains was, well, you're telling me that Coastal Carolina or ECU couldn't win the playoff. Well, if that's the logic, half of the Power 4 teams couldn't win the playoff. And there is a lot of truth to that, okay? So to go back to your point, hey, if we reformatted this thing right now, I'd pull like 20 G5 teams up, and I'd send 20 plus of the current Power 4 teams
relegation.
down,
there's a word for that.
and build in a mechanism where we don't crystallize the way it looks at the outset. But the other part of that is, what's the end goal? Like, what's the end game? Because I understand there's a big difference in having a coach at a G5 program, an administrator at a G5 program's opinion on this, versus a typical fan's opinion. The typical fan, this is what's fascinating to me. They have been convinced that television metrics and bowl payouts and all of these things that don't impact them should matter to them. And this is where I think the whole PE, the private equity sector that everyone's scared of at the Power 5 level could actually work its way into the overall mainframe. Because all this is about is money. If you removed the have and have not aspect of the disparity in revenue and income, everything else we're saying makes sense. And so I wonder, like, from a major private equity standpoint out there, if they look and say, hold on, these G5s, they're clinging to this system even though they know they're going to get their brains beat in a postseason because they know it subsidizes their existence. If we subsidize their existence, we essentially buy naming rights on a lot of these mid-major type programs. They can exist because we fund their existence. Do they need to cling to that anymore? And in the aggregate, like if I'm Josh Pate Enterprises and I bankroll this thing, could I also put my sticker on a brand new playoff that right now doesn't even exist? G5 playoff doesn't even exist right now. So that's kind of a conversation I had earlier this week with some people who live in that world. And, you know, they're always over in the shadows. So you got to talk to them through like a tomato can and a string attached. But I wonder if that's where the whole private equity dam breaks a little bit. I wonder if that's where the first crack is and that's where the first seepage is. Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about revenue disparity and a Tulane fan or an administrator or a coach who says, no, we want access to this. You want access to the payday that comes with it. No one in their, and let me say this slowly, right mind thinks that any of these teams could actually win that tournament. And anytime someone tells me, well, the tournament is not about crowning a champion, it's about the journey, it's insane to me.
That's like the, again, people who say that, hey, you play the tournament to find a winner. That's the whole reason there's an elimination tournament. Just to kind of put a bow on this, because it's a fascinating conversation, and it's amazing how worked up people get. I think a lot of this is ego from not only the fans of these group of 5 teams, because they want to be able to say, hey, look, you know, we're as important, which nobody's saying that you don't care about your team as much as I care about the Power 5 team that I like.
Quite the opposite.
It's quite the opposite. It's that we obviously know we're operating in different arenas. Now, when you look at a group of 5 playoff, I think that could be a legitimate moneymaker that could somewhat make up for if you can't play the Georgias during the regular season once this Super League happens. But That's why I keep saying we ought to play the spring game against teams that are Group of 5 within the Power 5 states and see how that goes. But it's a fascinating conversation. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Half the coaches want it, half the coaches don't. I think that's a little bit of ego as well. YouTube, what's up? I know y'all loving the new time. We are too. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Keep sharing the show. Y'all know what's about to go down when football season comes here too. Y'all know what's up.